All right, in this round, we're going to hit why can I trust the Bible? This is one I could spend forever talking on, but in my attempts to continue to be more and more brief, I'm only going to hit on a couple of the main topics that I like personally when I get that kind of question, or honestly, when I need to answer it for myself. One of the bigger ones that always stands out to me is the fact that we have multiple copies. And I know for a lot of folks that might actually be what kind of bothers them, but when you really think about it, there's a copy here and a copy here and a copy here and a copy there, different times, different people, I'll say the same thing. And every time something comes up and we find another copy, it says the same thing. And so I love that. There isn't one text that was, immortalized for forever that maybe could have been misunderstood. Look at the Gospels alone, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, when we compare them next to each other. They're all telling the same story from different perspectives, like four different people seeing a car accident. They're all going to have seen the same wreck, but slightly varying details. Nothing that deviates from what was actually going on there. The stories themselves were another big one for me. Those of you that have heard my salvation story know my whole thing about Paul. If I'm writing a story that I'm trying to get people to buy into, or I'm in some way trying to manipulate people, I'm not writing Peter's story the way he wrote it when the rooster crows, right? I'm not going to write that story about denying him. I'm going to be talking about, I was trying to talk Jesus down and step in. Paul's story in Acts, in his conversion from Saul to Paul, doesn't play out that way. These are real stories. This is showing real life examples of real people going through real things, for better, for worse. And most of the time, these stories are showing parts of these guys' lives they probably wouldn't want shared, especially if they were trying to manipulate something. The big one I go back to more than anything, sorry about the camera there, is Isaiah in the Dead Sea Scrolls in particular. Now, frequently when I get talking with folks and they go, well, which Bible or which translation, or, the Bible's been manipulated a lot, right? And I always ask them for details. Could you give me proof? And hey, I maybe kind of saw a part of a National Geographic show one time, and I'm presenting that as facts. And so the last thing I want to do is the same kind of thing. So when I'm talking about Isaiah, in 1947, there were 7 Dead Sea Scrolls that were found at Qumran. I think I'm pronouncing that right. 2,000 plus year old scrolls. About 25% of the Bible is in those scrolls. And almost the entirety, all 66 chapters of Isaiah are there. I know some of the edges and stuff were kind of frayed out, and there were some pieces that were lost to the restoration, all found in this cave in these scrolls. We know those have been on display at times in Israel in a museum. What I love is that when they did the translation on all of this, it was the same story, said the same things. It matched what we see today. So even just that one piece alone, over 2,000 years, we didn't mess with Isaiah. One of the more prominent stories of the Old Testament, in my opinion. Maybe it's just because I'm biased towards that story. But we're still seeing that thousands of years later, it didn't change. Nothing has moved around. We have over 6,000 handwritten manuscripts going back to as early as the 2nd century of the scriptures, with over 99% accuracy to today's print. What this is showing is that no, the scriptures have not changed. And there's tons of other evidence for other topics you can dive into, going all the way back to Genesis. People talking about, did Moses really write these books down, or was it written after him? The point is the accuracy is still the same. And without getting into those specific details and how those are accurate, you can do some digging on that yourself if you're interested in those. We are just continually seeing overwhelming evidence that the story, 1, does not change. 2, has always been the same and has always been there to guide God's people. Barry Ehrman, the great skeptic, atheist, scholar, even agrees with the Bible's written accuracy. Now, I don't want to put words into his mouth and say he believes in the Bible. He is very much an atheist, as far as I'm still aware. However, he does align with the accuracy of the scriptures. So somebody who has no reason to play on our side of the fence here is not denying the accuracy of the scriptures and what we've seen. A few other quick ones here. The creeds that have been found to align with the scriptures. as early as 1 to 2 years after Jesus' death, right? They keep finding these pieces that align with the scriptures. So these notes, these different creeds, these things that were put in play. So yeah, there might be some situations where Paul didn't write something down for, a couple of decades. But when they find early notes of some of this stuff, it still aligns. Again, constantly reinforcing and showing how it's maintained over time. I think the biggest one for me, and I'll leave you with this, is our own testimonies, our own study of the scriptures. For me, I have been studying and challenging the scriptures for 25, 26 years. I've been a Christian 24. I was reading the Bible about a year or two before that. Constantly, again, in the pursuit of truth in my own, what turned into salvation. I actually wasn't looking for Jesus or for a God or for salvation. I was pursuing truth, and amongst a great study found what that truth was in Jesus and the resurrection. And every time I find a point where I can't ratify something I don't understand, the Bible's math has proven time and time again to play out for me. And I'm using that as a figure of speech. What I'm saying there is, I've seen enough times where I don't know this one piece and something doesn't align, but as I continue to study, once I have the missing piece of the puzzle, all of a sudden it makes sense. I'm not having to bend words to work the way I want them to, or the way I think a good Christian should see. It ends up proving itself worthy. And so decades later, it's very easy for me to have faith if I find a small gap that I just don't know how it aligns. I have faith that as I continue to investigate that, I'll find the missing puzzle piece, and that will help quantify the question that I have and give me proof in the answer. And I can have faith in the short term until that becomes clear to me. So I think our own personal testing of and investigating of the scriptures, what does it say? What does it do? How does this align with our lives? And look at it. Those of us on the other side of salvation, we have the Spirit with us. The scriptures are no longer foolish to us, and we are trying to live this way in accordance with God's law. Has that ever led you wrong? And that in and of itself is not proof. However, billions of people over eons have continually gone through what God has said, what has been written down about what God has said, followed those teachings, and seen the benefits of that. And when we deviate from that, we see the consequence of that. We've seen prophecies come true over and over again. This wasn't post-dated. I already hit on a lot of that in some of the early history pieces I touched on, right? We see how these things go through time, and then when we find a piece of evidence, it still aligns and it still says the same thing. When I'm asked about that, that's usually the answer that I'm going to give around how do I trust the Bible. If somebody comes at me with something vague like the Bible can't be trusted or it changed a lot or anything like that, I do ask them to defend that statement, right? They're the ones making the asserted claim, and I ask them for the details. I don't promise I'm going to have an answer, but in almost every situation, I've had somebody give me some kind of quasi-vague something that I can't help them pinpoint down it. So I just stick to the accuracy of a couple of key topics and my own witness there. Anyways, hope this helps for our class on Sunday, and we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.